Bikers push around an old mechanic in his own garage, demanding protection money and smashing his late wife's precious Coca-Cola sign, while his teenage grandson watches in terror. The leather-clad thugs with prison tattoos think they've found another easy target in small-town Barstow, just another helpless senior citizen who'll pay up or get beaten down. But the quiet stranger who's been helping fix motorcycles isn't just some drifter passing through. This is Donnie Yen himself. The Iron Vultures have no idea they just terrorized a war veteran in front of a martial arts master who spent decades perfecting the art of destroying bullies with lightning-fast precision, while the gang leader raises his tire iron to crush the mechanic's hands. The legendary fighter steps from the shadows with that deadly calm his fans know means someone's about to learn a very painful lesson. The old veteran recognizes his unlikely savior and knows these prison-hardened criminals are about to discover why some movie legends are real-life warriors. The bikers think their numbers and weapons give them the advantage, but they're actually facing a man who can disarm 8 armed thugs in under 30 seconds. What happens when career criminals pick the wrong garage to terrorize? Will any of these tattooed bullies walk away from their encounter with a living legend? What happened next would haunt the Iron Vultures for the rest of their miserable lives. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The bell above the door chimed as Frank Kowalski unlocked his garage in the pre-dawn darkness of Barstow, California. At 67, his weathered hands moved with the same deliberate precision they'd shown for 30 years. Coffee maker first, then lights. Finally, the roll-up door that revealed Main Street stretching into the desert morning. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows onto tool benches unchanged since Helen's time. Frank's arthritis protested as he started his daily routine, but he pushed through the stiffness. Some rituals mattered more than comfort. Morning, Grandpa. Tommy Brennan skateboarded through the open door, 16 years old and radiating the kind of energy that made Frank feel ancient. Do I really have to be here? Kyle's having a 4-night tournament. Kyle's tournament won't teach you how the world actually works. Frank gestured toward the first customer of the day, a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better decades. Real skills matter when computers can't help you. The young Hispanic woman climbing out of the Honda looked exhausted, her waitress uniform wrinkled from a long night shift. Maria Santos counted crumpled bills with shaking hands. I don't know if I can afford much, she admitted. My mom's been sick, and this car. Frank lifted the hood and listened to the engine's labored breathing. Timing belt, probably water pump. Expensive work. He watched Maria's face fall as she calculated rent versus repairs. Tell you what, Frank said, Tommy watching curiously. Summer's slow. I'll do it for parts plus 50 labor. Grandpa, that's not even. Tommy started. That's not even close to enough, Frank finished firmly. But some things matter more than profit margins. As Maria drove away 20 minutes later, her Honda purring like new, Tommy shook his head. Helen's medical bills are still. Your grandmother taught me something important, Frank interrupted, cleaning his hands with the same methodical care he gave everything. Integrity in small things builds character for big ones. Through the window, he noticed something that made his Vietnam-trained instincts prickle. A line of motorcycles on the distant highway, chrome glinting in the morning sun. They were slowing. As they approached town, just passing through, Tommy asked, following his grandfather's gaze. Frank studied them through binoculars, counting 12 bikes in tight formation. Professional spacing. Deliberate approach. Maybe, he said quietly, but his expression suggested otherwise. The distant rumble of approaching engines grew louder, carrying promises of trouble across the desert air. The rumble became a roar as 12 Harley-Davidsons thundered down Main Street in perfect formation. The Iron Vultures Motorcycle Club, leather vests adorned with winged skull logos, parked with military precision outside Marge's diner. Frank and Tommy watched from the garage as their leader dismounted. Razor McCade was impossible to miss. Facial scars from knife fights, a spiderweb tattoo covering his neck, and dead gray eyes that had seen too much violence. His lieutenants fanned out around him. Viper, thin and dangerous. Diesel, built like a linebacker. Snake, younger but more volatile. Jesus, Tommy whispered. Language, Frank corrected automatically, but his attention stayed fixed on the diner across the street. Inside Marge's, the morning regulars, mostly retirees enjoying coffee and gossip, suddenly found themselves surrounded by leather and chrome. Razor ordered the works, but made no move toward payment. Instead, he placed a business card on the counter. Iron Vultures Protection Services. Marge Henderson, 71 years old and tough as desert hardpan, initially stood her ground. "I don't need protection. Sheriff Brennan has his hands full," Razor interrupted pleasantly. "Beautiful granddaughter you have, Mrs. Henderson. Susie, right? Plays at the elementary school playground every day at 3 p.m. The blood drained from Marge's face. Frank watched her shoulders sag in defeat. The bikers worked systematically. Through town. At the hardware store, Pete Morrison received the same visit, the same card, the same veiled threats about his family. Dr. Chang's pharmacy got similar attention. By noon, half the businesses on Main Street displayed small, protected by Iron Vultures stickers in their windows. Frank inventoried the damage from his position. Barstow was a dying desert town anyway. Half the storefronts empty, young people fleeing for bigger cities, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone but law enforcement was stretched impossibly thin. Perfect hunting ground for predators. "They're just going business to business," Tommy observed, trying to sound casual. "Establishing territory," Frank corrected. "Like wolves marking boundaries." Across the street, Marge hurried toward the garage, coffee cup rattling against its saucer. Her hands shook as she poured. "$500 a month," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the gas station where Razor sat on his bike, making notes in a small book. "Said if I don't pay, accidents happen to people I care about." Frank noticed she looked directly at him, and Tommy when she said it. Razor started his engine and rode slowly past the garage, making deliberate eye contact through the window. His smile promised pain. Wednesday morning arrived with the familiar rumble that now made Tommy's stomach clench. Frank was replacing brake pads on Maria's Honda when four motorcycles pulled up outside. Razor entered with his corps lieutenants, their boots loud on concrete. "Frank Kowalski," Razor said warmly, like greeting an old friend. "Heard you're a veteran." "Army myself. Discharged for disciplinary reasons. But who's counting?" Frank continued working, his movements steady despite the tension. "What can I do for you gentlemen? Beautiful operation you've got here." Razor wandered the garage, touching tools, examining equipment. 30 years in business, right? That takes dedication and courage. Tommy instinctively moved toward the back office, but Frank's quiet stay kept him rooted. "See, Frank, Barstow's changing. Lot of undesirable elements moving through, druggies, thieves, kids with no respect. The Iron Vultures provide security, services, professional protection, very reasonable rates." "Appreciate the offer," Frank said politely, "but I don't need protection." Razor's smile shifted almost imperceptibly. "Everyone needs protection, Frank. You've got this beautiful business, that grandson you're raising. Things can get dangerous for people who try to handle problems alone." The conversation continued for 10 minutes, Razor demonstrating impressive psychological manipulation. He mentioned Helen's death, Tommy's school schedule, even Frank's morning coffee routine. The message was clear. They'd been watching, planning. $500 monthly, Razor concluded. "Barely covers our operational costs, but we respect veterans." Frank set down his wrench and faced Razor directly. "I fought in Vietnam, so people like you couldn't shake down honest folks." The temperature in the garage dropped noticeably. Razor picked up Helen's antique Coca-Cola sign. Her last Christmas gift, hand-painted and irreplaceable. Beautiful craftsmanship, he mused, running fingers over vintage artwork. Real shame when beautiful things get damaged. He dropped it deliberately. Glass shattered across concrete with a sound like breaking bones. Tommy started forward angrily, but Frank's firm hand stopped him. Viper kicked shards, grinding them under his boot heel. 24 hours to reconsider, Frank. Razor's pleasantness had vanished entirely. "We're reasonable men, but our patience isn't unlimited." As the bikes roared away, Frank knelt to collect glass fragments, his hands steady despite obvious fury. "Can we fix it, Grandpa?" Frank studied the shattered pieces, thinking of Helen's smile when she'd presented it. "Some things can be fixed," he said quietly, watching the motorcycles disappear. "Others have to be replaced." Thursday morning brought fresh humiliation. The garage's front window cracked and "pay up or else" spray painted across the roll-up door in dripping red letters. Frank methodically cleaned the graffiti while Tommy raged. They can't just, they can, and they did. Frank scrubbed paint with mechanical precision. Anger without purpose is just noise, son. They want us angry and scared. Angry people make mistakes. Across the street, a quiet Asian man in simple clothes pumped gas into a modest sedan, seemingly oblivious to the garage's troubles. Something about his casual stance suggested he missed nothing. At exactly 10 a.m., 8 motorcycles returned. More. Bikers this time, including faces Frank didn't recognize. Razor's final offer was simple and non-negotiable. "No," Frank said. The beating was brutal but calculated. They avoided his head. No fatal injuries, but targeted ribs, back, and hands. When Tommy tried to intervene, Diesel's casual backhand sent the boy crashing into a tool cabinet. He hit concrete and went limp. Frank threw himself over Tommy's unconscious form, absorbing kicks and punches meant for his grandson. Through the pain, his military training catalog details. Viper favored his right hand, probably an old injury. Snake telegraphed his moves. Diesel was strong but slow. The assault stopped when Viper warned about attracting attention. As engines roared away, Frank crawled to Tommy, his ribs screaming protest. The boy was breathing, but blood trickled from his mouth. "You need medical attention." The quiet voice belonged to the man from the gas station. He moved with unusual grace, kneeling beside them with practiced efficiency. His hands, Frank noticed, showed extensive calluses and old scars suggesting serious martial arts training. "I have some experience with injuries," the stranger continued in lightly accented English. His demeanor radiated calm authority despite his unremarkable appearance. Frank struggled to focus through the pain. Something about this man seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. "Who are you?" "Just someone passing through," the man replied, gently helping Tommy sit up. "But I don't like seeing good people hurt." As sirens approached in the distance, Frank studied his unexpected helper. The calluses, the scars, the way he moved. This was no ordinary tourist. But right now, with Tommy hurt and his own ribs probably cracked, Frank was grateful for any kindness from strangers. The stranger worked with surprising efficiency, examining their injuries while introducing himself simply as Danny. "Nothing life-threatening," he assured Frank. "2 cracked ribs, maybe 3. Tommy had a mild concussion but would recover." Danny produced a first aid kit from his jacket with practiced ease, clearly accustomed to treating injuries. Sheriff Dale Brennan arrived 20 minutes later, summoned by Marge, who'd witnessed everything. A decent man in an impossible situation, Brennan explained the harsh reality with obvious frustration. "No witnesses willing to testify, Frank. Marge is too scared after yesterday's threats about her granddaughter. The Iron Vultures have connections with county officials. My hands are tied until someone goes on record." Danny listened while cleaning Frank's wounds, his expression thoughtful. Brennan continued reluctantly. "They've been asking about my family too. Lucy and Janet. I know it's not right, but without evidence." After the sheriff left, Danny helped organize tools and clean bloodstains. Frank found himself opening up to this quiet stranger who listened without judgment. Danny asked seemingly casual questions about Frank's military service, learning about Vietnam, Helen's cancer battle, and his determination to preserve her legacy through the garage. "Your motorcycle," Frank said eventually. "What's wrong with it?" "Transmission issues," Danny replied smoothly. "Nothing urgent." Frank studied Danny's hands more closely. Extensive calluses in very specific patterns, old scars from blade cuts, knuckles that had clearly been broken and reset multiple times. These weren't the hands of a casual rider. "You know, Danny," Frank said quietly, "your hands tell interesting stories." Danny paused in his work, meeting Frank's eyes directly. The mask of humble tourist slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "So do yours, Frank. Vietnam left its marks on all of us." The understanding between them was immediate and profound. Two warriors from different worlds, recognizing kindred spirits across generations and cultures. Frank sensed there was much more to Danny than met the eye, but some mysteries revealed themselves in their own time. For now, It was enough to have found an ally when enemies circled closer. Friday morning, Frank arrived to find the roll-up door repaired, graffiti gone, and mechanisms operating smoothly. Danny emerged from the shadows, putting away borrowed tools with master craftsman precision. Couldn't sleep, he explained simply. Figured I'd make myself useful. Throughout the day, Danny demonstrated remarkable versatility, equally skilled with delicate electronics and heavy mechanical work. When Tommy arrived sporting a black eye but determined to work, Danny quietly taught him stretching exercises that Frank recognized as martial arts movements. For your injuries, Danny explained, guiding Tommy through flowing motions that emphasized awareness and evasion over confrontation. His teaching method was patient and methodical, never condescending despite the age difference. Danny revealed small details about himself, extensive travel, experience with many machinery types, an almost supernatural ability to diagnose problems by sound alone. He spoke respectfully to Frank as an equal, never acknowledging their age difference or Frank's obvious limitations. When a customer brought a motorcycle with engine problems, Danny's examination revealed knowledge far beyond casual riding. He identified the specific model, year, and modification history with expert precision. More tellingly, his hand movements displayed the fluid accuracy of serious combat training. Frank watched these demonstrations with growing recognition. His military background had taught him to identify dangerous men, and Danny moved like someone who'd spent decades perfecting violence as an art form. Helen used to love martial arts movies, Frank mentioned casually while they inventoried parts. Particularly that amazing Chinese actor, Donnie something. Danny's hands paused almost imperceptibly over a wrench. Donnie Yen, he supplied quietly. Yes, that's him. Helen always said real martial artists were like good mechanics. They understood how things worked together, how to fix what was broken. Danny met his eyes with a slight smile. Your wife was a wise woman. Frank studied Danny's face more carefully, that nagging sense of familiarity growing stronger. The bone structure, the way he moved, even his speech patterns when he forgot. To be careful, but some revelations came in their own time, and Frank was patient enough to wait. Saturday morning's peace shattered with screaming from across the street. Through the garage window, Frank and Danny watched the Iron Vultures systematically destroying Marge's diner, overturning tables, smashing dishes, terrorizing elderly customers eating breakfast. Danny's casual demeanor began cracking as he witnessed innocent people being hurt. His body language shifted subtly, becoming more centered and ready. When elderly Walter Jenkins tried to protect Marge, Viper shoved the World War II veteran into a table. The 80-year-old man hit hard and lay motionless. Danny's hands clenched into fists. After destroying the diner, the bikers visited other businesses. Hardware store owner Pete Morrison, pharmacist Dr. Chong, bank manager Robert Kelly, all received the same message. Associating with troublemakers brought consequences. By afternoon, Frank's isolation was complete. Former customers canceled appointments. Friends crossed the street to avoid him. The community that had supported him for 30 years suddenly treated him like a disease. Tommy begged his grandfather to pay the money. You're hurting everyone, he pleaded. Maybe they're right. Maybe we should just give them what they want. Frank explained patiently. Giving in to extortion doesn't end the problem, son. It makes it worse. Today it's $500. Next month it's $1,000. Then they want favors. Then they own you completely. Danny listened to this conversation while appearing to focus on his work, but his body language suggested internal conflict. Frank's principled stance was inspiring, but the cost to innocent people was mounting. As the last customer drove away, Frank sat heavily on his work stool. The weight of responsibility, for Tommy, for the town, for principles Helen had died believing in, pressed down like a physical force. Maybe Tommy's right, Frank admitted quietly. Maybe I'm being selfish. Danny set down his tools and approached directly. My grandfather once told me that a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. You're not standing for yourself, Frank. You're standing for everyone who can't. Outside, Razor circled the garage on his bike, revving his engine in obvious intimidation. The sound echoed off concrete walls like a promise of violence to come. Sunday afternoon found Frank alone in the garage, rebuilding Helen's shattered Coca-Cola sign. Tommy had stayed home on his mother's orders, and Danny hadn't appeared since early morning. Frank worked methodically, salvaging pieces and creating new components, determined to restore something beautiful from the wreckage. The approaching roar of 8 motorcycles interrupted his concentration. The Iron Vultures parked in formation outside, Razor carrying a tire iron while Diesel wielded a baseball bat. This wasn't intimidation, this was war. "Time's up, Frank," Razor announced, entering with his men. "You made us look weak, and weakness is bad for business. We're going to cripple your hands so you can never work again, then burn this place down as an example." Frank stood calmly behind his workbench, the rebuilt sign displayed prominently. "You boys sure picked the wrong day for this." Razor laughed harshly. "Wrong day? Old man, every day's wrong for you now." As Razor raised the tire iron to crush Frank's hands, a calm voice spoke from the shadows near the back in trance. "Gentlemen, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Danny stepped into the light, but everything about him had changed. His posture was different, more centered, confident. The humble tourist demeanor had vanished, replaced by quiet authority that filled the garage like electricity. Razor sneered and swung the tire iron at this new threat. What happened next occurred almost too quickly to follow. Danny moved with liquid grace, intercepting the weapon and redirecting Razor's momentum into a tool cabinet. Diesel charged with his bat, but found himself airborne before understanding how. Viper drew a knife. It was disarmed and turned against him in one flowing motion. In 30 seconds, 5 bikers were unconscious or writhing on the floor. The remaining thugs backed toward the exit, reaching for weapons, but froze when Danny spoke again. "My name is Donnie Yen," he said simply, his accent more pronounced now. "And I really, truly don't like bullies." Frank stared in amazement. He'd suspected, but this revelation exceeded his wildest hopes. The surviving bikers fled toward their motorcycles, abandoning their fallen comrades as sirens approached in the distance. "You're really him," Frank said, still processing the transformation. Donnie smiled modestly, becoming Danny again in demeanor if not identity. "Your wife had excellent taste in movies." Sheriff Brennan arrived to find 5 unconscious bikers artistically arranged around the garage floor. No weapons, no blood, just perfectly incapacitated criminals. Frank stood beside a modest Asian man who somehow radiated calm authority despite his unremarkable appearance. "What happened here, Frank?" Frank looked at Donnie, who nodded slightly. "Sheriff, I'd like you to meet Donnie Yen." Word spread through Barstow like wildfire. Within 2 hours, half the town had driven past the garage for glimpses of the legendary martial artist. Marge arrived with free coffee and pie, tears streaming as she thanked both men. Tommy raced over on his skateboard, absolutely starstruck. "Is it really you? Can you teach me those moves?" "How did you?" Donnie handled the attention with characteristic humility, deflecting praise toward Frank's courage. "Your grandfather stood up to 12 armed men," he told Tommy. "That's real heroism." The town's mood shifted dramatically. Pete Morrison reopened his hardware store and publicly announced he wouldn't pay protection money. Dr. Chong organized a community meeting to discuss recent developments. Even teenagers gathered around the garage, hoping for autographs. Tommy became an unofficial tour guide, proudly explaining how his grandfather had faced down the entire Iron Vultures chapter. "Grandpa never backed down," he told anyone who'd listen, not even when they had weapons. As evening approached, Donnie helped Frank close the garage while dealing with a steady stream of visitors. A young girl asked for his autograph, and he graciously complied, including a message, "Be brave like Mr. Frank." After the crowds thinned, Frank and Donnie sat on the garage's front porch, sharing beer and watching the desert sunset paint the sky orange and purple. "You know this isn't over," Frank said quietly. "They'll be back, and they'll be angry." Donnie nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, they will. But now they know they're not dealing with helpless victims." In the distance, a single motorcycle engine carried on the night air, someone watching, waiting, planning revenge. The first battle was won, but the war was just beginning. The real test would come when the Iron Vultures returned in force. Monday morning brought unwanted complications. A news van from the regional TV station parked outside the garage, and reporter Janet Williams conducted interviews with early arriving townspeople. The story of a movie star defending a small town was attracting media attention that threatened to complicate an already dangerous situation. Sheriff Brennan arrived with urgent intelligence. The five we arrested made bail an hour ago. Worse, intercepted communications suggest the Nevada chapter is sending reinforcements. We're talking 30 to 40 serious criminals. The sheriff's weathered face showed the strain of impossible circumstances. My department can't handle that kind of force, and the county's compromised. You're on your own. Donnie began subtly assessing the town's defensive capabilities while maintaining his humble public persona. Walking Main Street with Frank, he identified choke points, escape routes, and strategic positions. His Hollywood connections became useful when phone calls resulted in coincidental deliveries, construction equipment for a movie shoot that never materialized. Just some gear we don't need, Donnie explained to curious reporters, but Frank recognized the tactical potential of lighting rigs, sound equipment, and barrier materials. Tommy became Donnie's shadow, absorbing every word about self-defense, discipline, and responsibility. Frank watched this mentoring relationship with approval, seeing his grandson gain confidence and purpose under the action star's patient guidance. Marge organized informal support networks with business owners, contributing food, supplies, and moral support. The community that had nearly fractured under pressure was slowly rebuilding stronger than before. Throughout the day, townspeople reported sightings of unfamiliar motorcycles on distant roads, scouts assessing the situation. Phone calls to the police department increased as residents reported suspicious activities. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as everyone realized the garage confrontation was just the opening move. That evening, as the news crew packed equipment, Donnie Yen, Frank discussed strategy in the garage. Tommy practiced defensive moves, his confidence growing with each repetition. They're going to come in force, Frank observed. Overwhelming numbers, hoping to end this quickly and brutally. Donnie watched Tommy's progress approvingly. Numbers aren't everything. But you're right. We need to prepare for war. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, and both men recognized the sound of approaching danger. Tuesday morning brought federal intervention. FBI Special Agent Janet Rodriguez arrived in an unmarked sedan, her presence immediately changing the atmosphere. A 20-year veteran specializing in organized crime, her first words were chilling. This isn't about protection money. It's about something much worse. Rodriguez revealed the horrifying truth. The Iron Vultures were enforcement for a human trafficking network moving young women from Central America to brothels in major cities. Barstow's location on Interstate 15 made it a critical waypoint, and Frank's garage sat on a route traffickers had used for 3 years. Local corruption allowed this operation to flourish, Rodriguez explained, showing photographs of missing women, many no older than Tommy. Your defiance threatens to expose everything. They're not coming back for money. They're coming to eliminate witnesses to a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. The agent's limitations became clear immediately. Federal investigation had been building for 2 years, but local corruption ran deep. Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Webb was feeding information to traffickers, and direct intervention could destroy months of careful work while allowing network leaders to escape. I can't officially help you, Rodriguez admitted, but stopping this network here could save dozens of lives. Frank's military background made him grasp the strategic implications immediately. They weren't facing angry bikers anymore, but professional criminals with resources, connections, and experience eliminating problems. That Donnie's expression grew increasingly grave as he learned about the trafficking victims. His usual calm demeanor hardened with suppressed anger. This wasn't just about protecting Frank's garage anymore. How many women? He asked quietly. We estimate 30 to 40 currently in the pipeline, Rodriguez replied. Ages 14 to 22. Most families think they're dead. After the agent left, Frank and Donnie stood in uncomfortable silence, processing the magnitude of what they faced. Helen always said every choice reveals who you really are, Frank finally said. Looks like we're about to find out who we are. Donnie nodded grimly, his movie star persona completely gone. I already know who I am. The question is whether I'm brave enough to act on it. The stakes had just become life and death for dozens of innocent women. Wednesday morning transformed the garage into a covert operations center. Donnie made phone calls in rapid Cantonese, and within hours, film equipment began arriving. To casual observers, it looked like movie production preparation. To trained eyes, it was defensive positioning, lighting rigs that could blind attackers, sound equipment capable of disorienting multiple targets, technical devices serving dual purposes, all disguised as Hollywood glamour. Donnie began teaching basic self-defense to willing townspeople, always emphasizing protection over aggression. His classes took place behind the garage, disguised as movie stunt demonstrations for curious onlookers. Marge organized the women into communication networks while Pete Morrison quietly distributed hunting supplies to men with military backgrounds. Frank revealed his hidden arsenal, hunting rifles from his old sporting goods days, stored in a basement compartment Helen had insisted on during Cold War fears. The weapons were old but well-maintained, and Frank's Vietnam experience included urban combat tactics surprisingly relevant to their current situation. Guerrilla warfare principles, he explained to Donnie while cleaning rifle actions. Use terrain advantages, avoid direct confrontation, force enemies into kill zones where superior numbers don't matter. The community came together in ways not seen for decades. Dr. Chong established a medical station in her clinic's basement. Bank manager Robert Kelly coordinated financial support for families who might lose income. Even teenagers contributed by setting up observation posts and communication networks using social media. Donnie demonstrated how household items became defensive weapons, kitchen knives balanced for throwing, cleaning supplies creating smoke screens, garden tools repositioned as barriers. His teaching method remained patient but thorough, ensuring everyone understood they were preparing for war, not entertainment. That evening, as impromptu training ended, Frank surveyed the transformed town. I haven't seen people work together like this since Helen's cancer fundraiser. Donnie tested a rifle's action, his handling revealing military-level familiarity with weapons. The question now is whether we're strong enough to survive what's coming. In the distance, engine sounds carried on night air, multiple motorcycles, still far away, but approaching steadily like a mechanical storm gathering strength. Thursday morning brought Sheriff Brennan racing to the garage with terrifying news. 37 Iron Vultures had established camp 15 miles outside town, just beyond his jurisdiction. Their leader wasn't Razor. It was his older brother, Snake Rodriguez. This changes everything, Brennan warned, his face grim. Snake's got connections to Mexican cartels, a murder conviction, and a reputation for extreme violence. He's not here for revenge. He's here to eliminate a threat to millions in annual trafficking revenue. Agent Rodriguez arrived with disturbing intelligence from FBI surveillance. Snake had brought specialists, a demolitions expert, a sniper, several men with military backgrounds. They weren't planning simple assault. They were preparing siege warfare designed to minimize infrastructure damage while maximizing psychological terror. He needs Barstow intact for future operations, Rodriguez explained. So he'll make examples of key resistors while terrorizing everyone else into submission. The enemy's professional approach became clear through intercepted communications. Cut communications, block escape routes, systematically eliminate resistance while preserving valuable trafficking infrastructure. Snake was treating this like a military operation, not a biker gang dispute. Internal pressure mounted as not everyone supported continued resistance. Hardware customer Bill Watson organized a faction demanding Frank and Donnie leave to protect everyone else. The town began fracturing under stress, with some families packing to leave while others prepared to fight. Tommy faced peer pressure as friends' parents forbade association with the troublemakers. The boy's determination wavered as he realized his grandfather's principles were costing the entire community. As evening approached, Snake rode alone into town under a white flag. Unlike his crude brother, Snake was soft-spoken and articulate, his Spanish accent lending scholarly quality to his words. "I'm a reasonable man," he explained to Frank, Donnie, and Sheriff Brennan. "Hand over the troublemakers, and everyone else lives peacefully. You have until dawn to decide." After he rode away, Frank looked at Donnie with weary recognition. 20 years ago, I would have been excited by a challenge like this. Donnie managed a slight smile. 20 years ago, I thought movie fights were realistic. Age brings wisdom, and better judgment about impossible odds. Friday morning's dawn passed without response to Snake's ultimatum, but instead of immediate retaliation, psychological pressure intensified. Motorcycles circled the town's perimeter just beyond rifle range, their constant engine noise creating an atmosphere of impending doom that Snake's psychological warfare proved devastatingly effective. Some families attempted to leave, only to find roads blocked by broken-down motorcycles that cleared just long enough for them to return to town. The message was clear: nobody left without permission. Bill Watson's faction grew larger, demanding Frank and Donnie's departure. A town meeting became heated confrontation, with Marge leading resistance supporters while Watson argued for capitulation. The community that had seemed united just days before fragmented under unbearable pressure. "They're not asking much," Watson argued desperately. "Two lives versus everyone else's safety. It's simple mathematics." "It's simple cowardice," Marge shot back. "You think giving them what they want stops here? Next month they'll want something else, then something else." Donnie used the delay strategically, moving through desert darkness with skills that surprised even Frank. His reconnaissance of the bikers' camp revealed horrifying evidence: a modified trailer truck with hidden compartments, restraints, makeshift cells. Worse, he observed 3 young women being held captive, proof of crimes far exceeding extortion. The photographs he took changed everything. "This isn't about us anymore," Frank realized, studying images of frightened faces pressed against small windows. "Those girls will die if we run." Sheriff Brennan stared at the evidence, his law enforcement instincts warring with protective impulses. "If we do this, there's no going back. Snake won't leave witnesses." Snake demonstrated his reach by cutting power, then restoring it with a phone call, proof of utility company connections. Phone service became intermittent. Internet access disappeared randomly. The message was clear: he controlled more than motorcycles and guns. That evening, as the town huddled in darkened buildings, Frank faced the hardest decision of his life. His stubborn refusal to pay protection money had escalated into war-threatening innocent lives, but the photographs of captive women made retreat impossible. "Then we better make sure we win," Donnie said quietly, checking his equipment with methodical precision. Friday night, 11:30 p.m. Donnie moved through the desert like a ghost, using skills learned from decades of action choreography and martial arts training. The bikers' camp was professionally positioned to control the main highway, with sentries at regular intervals and roving patrols. The rescue mission required reaching the trailer truck without triggering general alarm. Using stealth, misdirection, and precise violence, Donnie neutralized guards and created small diversions. The 3 women, Consuela, 19, Maria, 17, Sofia, 16, were terrified and injured but alive. "Vengo a ayudarlas," Donnie whispered in careful Spanish. "You're safe now." Getting them out proved more difficult than getting in. Consuela had a sprained ankle from attempting escape, and Maria was weak from dehydration. Donnie supported them while evading increasingly frequent patrols through treacherous canyon terrain. Just as they reached the canyon mouth, a sentry discovered the empty trailer. Alarms sounded throughout the camp, and within minutes, 6 motorcycles with powerful headlights pursued them through the desert. Donnie commandeered an abandoned ATV hidden near the camp, but it wasn't powerful enough to outrun Harleys while carrying 3 passengers. The high-speed chase through desert terrain showcased Donnie's incredible riding skills, jumping arroyos, weaving between rock formations, creating dust clouds to obscure their position. When cornered, he used improvised weapons and martial arts to disable pursuing bikers, but the ATV was damaged in the process. By the time they reached town's outskirts, the vehicle was dying and foot pursuit impossible. Frank appeared with his pickup truck, having waited at the designated meeting point despite obvious danger. As they sped toward town, Donnie looked back to see headlights spreading in search patterns. "They know exactly where we are now," he told Frank grimly. "And they know we have evidence of their trafficking operation." Frank gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white in the dashboard light. "Then there's no backing down. It's war." The 3 rescued women huddled in the truck bed, free but understanding their liberation, had just painted targets on everyone who'd helped them. Snake's voice crackled over emergency radio frequencies. promising consequences that would make everyone regret interfering with his business. Saturday morning, 7:15 a.m. The three rescued women were safe in Dr. Chang's clinic, receiving medical attention and giving statements to Agent Rodriguez. Their testimony provided crucial evidence of the trafficking network's scope and brutality. Routes, safe houses, key figures, transportation methods. For the first time since this began, law enforcement seemed to have the upper hand. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with FBI units in Nevada and California, preparing to move against the network's leadership. Arrest warrants were being prepared based on the women's identification of photographs at BY noon. Everything appeared to favor justice. FBI surveillance confirmed the bikers' camp location, federal backup units positioned around the region, and Agent Rodriguez assured Frank and Donnie that protection was now possible. The townspeople emerged from hiding, beginning to believe the worst was over. Tommy proudly told friends that his grandfather and Donnie had beaten the bad guys. Bill Watson even approached Frank with grudging apology for his earlier demands at 2:30 p.m. The trap revealed itself with devastating completeness. FBI units moved on the camp, finding it completely abandoned except for a sophisticated explosive device. The blast destroyed crucial evidence and injured 2 federal agents. Simultaneously, all local communications, phone, internet, radio, went dead. Snake's voice came through emergency frequencies with chilling calm. "You have 1 hour to bring me Frank Kowalski and Donnie Yen, or Sheriff Brennan's wife and daughter die." To prove his seriousness, he provided details about the Brennan family that only intimate surveillance could have gathered: Janet's morning routine, Lucy's after-school activities, even their dog's name. Agent Rodriguez admitted the crushing truth. Federal informants among local law enforcement had warned Snake hours in advance. Deputy Marcus Webb was found dead in his patrol car, apparently killed by his own criminal contacts to eliminate loose ends. With 58 minutes remaining on Snake's ultimatum, Frank and Donnie faced an impossible choice. The 3 rescued women begged them not to surrender, knowing Snake would kill everyone to eliminate witnesses. Tommy, tears streaming, pleaded with his grandfather to find another way. "There has to be something we can do." Frank looked at Donnie, both men recognizing they were out of conventional options. "Sometimes you have to choose who lives and who dies. And sometimes the only choice is to fight when you can't win." Saturday afternoon, 3:15 p.m. With 43 minutes remaining on Snake's ultimatum, the garage became a crisis center. Agent Rodriguez paced frantically, her federal resources useless without hostage location. The rescued women huddled with Dr. Chong, their trauma magnified by guilt. Tommy sat with Frank and Donnie, all 3 understanding surrender meant death for everyone. Snake's psychological warfare intensified when Janet Brennan's voice crackled over the radio, forced to read a message begging Frank and Donnie to surrender. The transmission gave no location clues. Background sounds carefully filtered. Sheriff Brennan arrived haggard with desperation, authorized to offer anything for his family's safety. The town fractured completely as the deadline approached. Bill Watson's supporters demanded immediate surrender, 2 lives versus dozens. Marge led opposition, insisting capitulation would only result in more deaths. Fistfights erupted in the street as neighbors turned against each other under unbearable pressure. Children cried as parents screamed at each other about impossible choices. In this darkest moment, Frank and Donnie's true characters emerged. Frank remembered Helen's cancer battle. Some fights were worth fighting even when you couldn't win, because the fight itself had meaning. Donnie, drawing on years of playing heroes, realized real heroism meant accepting responsibility when outcomes were uncertain. 28 minutes, Agent Rodriguez announced, her voice breaking. Donnie revealed his strategy, tracking communication patterns and supply routes, building Snake's psychological profile. The evidence destruction was expected. Snake was paranoid and thorough, but thoroughness created patterns, and Donnie had identified 3 possible hostage locations. "The abandoned mine complex northeast of town," he explained. Snake's tactical preferences, terrain analysis, psychological profile, it all points there. Frank made the hardest decision of his life, announcing over emergency radio that he and Donnie would surrender at the garage in 25 minutes. But his eyes met Donnie's in silent communication, This wasn't surrender, it was misdirection. Tommy grabbed his grandfather's hand. I'm going with you. Frank started protesting, but Donnie intervened. Some battles require all generations to fight together. Outside, approaching motorcycles grew louder as Snake's forces moved to collect their victory. Saturday afternoon, 3:40 p.m. With Snake's forces positioning around the garage for surrender, Donnie revealed his full plan to Frank and Agent Rodriguez. His tracking of communication patterns, combined with terrain analysis and psychological profiling, identified the most likely hostage location, the abandoned mine complex 20 miles northeast. That Donnie's plan was audacious and desperate. While he and Frank appeared to surrender, a small team would assault the mine. Timing had to be perfect. Too early and Snake would kill hostages. Too late and he'd kill them after the surrender proved false. Frank's military experience became crucial for planning misdirection. They'd meet Snake's demands publicly, drawing maximum attention, while Tommy and volunteers used Frank's knowledge of mining roads to reach the hostage location. I explored those mines as a teenager, Frank explained. Maintenance tunnels the adults don't know about. 3 townspeople volunteered for the rescue. Pete Morrison with Korea combat experience, Dr. Chong as military medic, and surprisingly Marge Henderson, whose late husband was mine foreman and taught her underground layouts. Tommy insisted on joining despite his age, arguing his size allowed access to shafts adults couldn't use. Frank's initial refusal gave way to proud acceptance when Tommy demonstrated this wasn't teenage bravado. He understood stakes and accepted responsibility. The maintenance tunnels are narrow and dangerous, Frank warned, but they provide access. Routes Snake's forces won't expect or guard. Agent Rodriguez would coordinate with remaining FBI units, but assault success depended on the small team moving undetected through forgotten passages Frank remembered from 60 years ago. 12 minutes remaining, Rodriguez announced. The 2 plans launched simultaneously. Frank and Donnie walked toward the garage's front entrance, hands visible and empty, while Tommy led the rescue team through hidden routes toward the mine complex. The Snake's voice crackled over radio, counting down final minutes with obvious satisfaction. You made the right choice. Death with honor is still death. Frank keyed his radio one last time. Snake, you forgot something important about old soldiers. We don't surrender. We just reload. The convergence of both operations created maximum tension as success or failure would be determined in minutes. Saturday afternoon, 3:52 p.m. Frank and Donnie approached the garage where Snake waited with 12 heavily armed bikers. The scene was deliberately theatrical. Snake wanted the town witnessing this victory. But as they walked, Frank shared crucial intelligence about mine layouts from 6 decades of memory. Their conversation revealed deepest characters as they faced certain death. Frank spoke of Helen's courage during cancer, facing impossible odds with dignity. Donnie shared stories of his father's resistance against Japanese occupation. Some fights transcended individual survival. That Frank's Vietnam tunnel warfare experience proved surprisingly relevant. He guided Tommy's team through radio communication, describing the mine's layout from teenage exploration. Maintenance tunnels were narrow and dangerous, but provided access routes Snake's forces wouldn't expect. Third tunnel from the main entrance, Frank whispered into his radio. 40 yards in, you'll find a vertical shaft leading to the processing level. That's where they'll keep hostages. Central location, easy to guard, multiple escape routes. At exactly 4 p.m., both operations converged. Frank and Donnie surrendered to Snake at the garage while Tommy's team entered the mine complex through forgotten maintenance tunnels Frank had described. In what might be their final conversation, Frank and Donnie discussed their unlikely friendship. 2 warriors from different cultures and generations, united by shared values and mutual respect. I'm proud to fight beside someone I've admired on screen for years, Frank admitted. Donnie countered that Frank's real-life courage surpassed any movie hero. You stood up to armed criminals to protect your principles. That's true heroism. The timing was critical as Snake forced them to kneel in the garage, surrounded by weapons, while half the town watched from forced positions. His victory speech was interrupted by radio silence from the mine complex. Guards had stopped responding to check-ins. That Snake's confidence began wavering as Frank's calm demeanor suggested hidden knowledge. When Snake threatened immediate execution, Donnie revealed that federal units were converging on trafficking sites. The rescued women's intelligence had compromised Snake's entire network. At 4:18 p.m., Tommy's voice crackled over radio from the mine. "Grandpa, we have them. Mrs. Brennan and Lucy are safe." Snake's expression shifted from confidence to rage as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered by an elderly mechanic and a movie star. Saturday afternoon, for 19 p.m. With hostages rescued and strategic advantage eliminated, Snake's careful planning dissolved into desperate violence. He ordered immediate execution of Frank and Donnie, but the garage's layout, carefully prepared over the past week, became a tactical nightmare for attackers. The garage transformed into a battlefield where experience and intelligence triumphed over youth and firepower. Frank used intimate building knowledge, leading Snake's men into prepared kill zones where Donnie could engage with maximum advantage. The film equipment positioned earlier became defensive weaponry. Lighting rigs created blinding flashes. Sound equipment generated disorienting noise. Snake, realizing his operation was collapsing, focused rage on Frank, the ordinary man whose stubborn courage had destroyed years of criminal planning. Their confrontation became deeply personal as Snake revealed his trafficking network's scope and lives destroyed. "You have no idea what you've cost me," Snake snarled. "Millions in revenue, dozens of contacts, years of careful work." Frank's response was simple: "Some things are worth dying to stop." The action sequence showcased Donnie's martial arts skills in their most brutal and effective form. This wasn't movie choreography, but real combat where every move served to protect innocent lives. His opponents were experienced criminals, but unprepared for someone combining world-class training with tactical intelligence and moral conviction. Frank proved age and treachery could overcome youth and enthusiasm. His Vietnam experience, combined with environmental knowledge, allowed him to outmaneuver younger opponents. When razors sought revenge, Frank demonstrated some lessons were learned in war and never forgotten. As the battle reached its climax, Frank and Donnie found themselves fighting back-to-back, two warriors from different worlds united in common cause. Snake, wounded and desperate, made a final attempt to destroy everything by triggering explosive charges planted around the garage. "If I can't win, everyone dies." The timer showed 30 seconds as Frank and Donnie realized they must choose between their own escape and protecting townspeople watching from across the street. Without discussion, they rushed toward the crowd to create maximum distance from the impending blast. Saturday afternoon, for 31 p.m. With 28 seconds remaining on Snake's explosive timer, Frank and Donnie made their choice without discussion. They rushed toward the townspeople to create maximum distance between the crowd and impending blast. Their self-sacrificing action galvanized the entire community as everyone worked together to evacuate the danger zone. That Donnie's knowledge of demolitions, gained from years of action movie experience, allowed him to partially disarm Snake's charges, reducing their destructive power. The explosion damaged the garage but didn't level it completely. Frank suffered injuries from flying debris but survived thanks to Donnie's protective positioning. The final confrontation between the two men and Snake became intensely personal. Snake, bloodied but still dangerous, revealed the full scope of his trafficking empire. Dozens of small towns destroyed, hundreds of lives ruined, millions in profits from human misery. "You think this changes anything?" Snake screamed, raising his gun despite his injuries. "I've built this network for 20 years. One old mechanic can't destroy that." Frank, struggling to stand through his injuries, met Snake's eyes directly. "Sometimes one person standing up is all it takes. Sometimes that's enough." The battle showcased both Donnie's martial arts mastery and Frank's guerrilla warfare experience. Frank used the damaged garage's layout tactically, collapsing support beams, using equipment as weapons, exploiting terrain knowledge against younger opponents. When Razor made a final assault seeking revenge for his earlier humiliation, Frank demonstrated that courage and experience could triumph over youth and brutality. Their fight became symbolic, old school values versus modern criminal arrogance. Donnie faced Snake in hand-to-hand combat that proved decisive. The cartel-connected criminal was skilled and vicious, But he'd never faced someone who combined world-class martial arts training with unshakable moral conviction. As Snake fell unconscious, sirens finally approached. Agent Rodriguez's backup units surrounded the area, coordinating arrests of surviving Iron Vultures members. The explosion's aftermath revealed the garage's symbolic importance. Helen's rebuilt Coca-Cola sign had survived intact, protected by Frank's careful positioning. Some things endured despite everything thrown against them. With Snake defeated and the trafficking network exposed, justice finally seemed possible for everyone involved. Saturday afternoon, for 4:45 p.m., with Snake and his surviving followers in federal custody, Agent Rodriguez coordinated the capture of the Iron Vultures' remaining network. Federal units simultaneously raided trafficking sites across 3 states, guided by intelligence from the rescued women and documentation Donnie had secretly gathered. The scope of the criminal enterprise became clear as arrests mounted. Dozens of missing women were recovered from safe houses and transport vehicles. The trafficking route through Barstow was permanently closed, severing a pipeline that had operated for years. Snake, severely injured but conscious, faced federal charges guaranteeing life imprisonment. His criminal empire collapsed as subordinates scrambled to make deals with prosecutors. The corruption in local law enforcement was exposed and cleaned out, with Sheriff Brennan cleared of wrongdoing and several deputies arrested. Deputy Webb's death was revealed as execution by his own criminal contacts, eliminating loose ends that could have exposed higher-level corruption. His betrayal had endangered his own colleagues and community, making his fate grimly appropriate. The 3 rescued women, Consuela, Maria, and Sofia, provided testimony that closed dozens of missing person cases and prevented countless future victims. Their courage in speaking against their captors ensured the network's leadership would never threaten anyone again. Community healing began immediately. Bill Watson personally apologized to Frank, admitting his fear nearly cost innocent lives. The business community rallied to rebuild the garage, with everyone contributing labor and materials as penance for their earlier abandonment. "We should have stood with you from the beginning," Pete Morrison admitted while helping clear debris. "Fear made us cowards when we should have been neighbors." Marge organized a celebration dinner at her repaired diner, bringing the entire town together for the first time since the crisis began. The meal became a community-wide expression of gratitude and renewed solidarity. As evening fell, Frank surveyed the damage and recovery with quiet satisfaction. Helen's Coca-Cola sign hung intact in its original position, symbolizing endurance through adversity. She would have been proud, he told Donnie, touching the sign gently. Good people coming together to do right. That's what she always believed in. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the community had rediscovered its soul. Sunday morning, 1 week later, national media discovered the story of a small desert town that stood up to human traffickers, and Barstow became the center of unwanted attention. News crews, government officials, and Hollywood representatives descended on the community that wanted to return to normal life. Frank and Donnie handled media attention with characteristic humility, consistently redirecting praise toward townspeople who risked everything to save innocent lives. When reporters focused on the movie star hero angle, Donnie insisted Frank's courage inspired everything that followed. Heroes aren't people who do impossible things, Donnie explained to cameras. They're ordinary people who do necessary things when others can't or won't. Governor Patricia Williams presented Frank with the state's highest civilian honor for courage in the face of criminal threats. The ceremony took place at the rebuilt garage, with the entire town in attendance and Helen's restored sign prominently displayed. Frank's acceptance speech was characteristically brief. "My wife always said courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite the fear." Everyone here showed that kind of courage. The trauma of the past week brought the community closer together in unexpected ways. Bill Watson organized a fund to help other trafficking victims, channeling his guilt into productive action. Marge established a community watch program ensuring nothing like this could happen again unnoticed. Dr. Chong provided ongoing counseling for the rescued women, who chose to remain in Barstow rather than return to areas controlled by criminal networks. Their presence served as daily reminders of why the fight had been necessary and worthwhile. Tommy had matured dramatically through the experience, displaying confidence and purpose that impressed teachers and friends. He began teaching self-defense to younger children, passing on lessons learned from Donnie while maintaining his grandfather's values. As the media circus wound down, Frank found Donnie working alone in the garage, carefully polishing Helen's Coca-Cola sign with the same precision he brought to everything. "You don't have to do that," Frank said. "It's just a sign." Donnie looked up with a slight smile. "It's not just a sign. It's a symbol of everything you fought to protect: memories, values, the belief that some things are worth preserving." They worked together in comfortable silence, two friends who had shared something profound. Sunday evening, 2 weeks after the battle, the garage was fully operational again, busier than it had been in years as community support brought new customers and renewed business. Frank moved with less stiffness, his injuries healing, but more importantly, his spirit had been renewed through standing up and winning. Donnie prepared to leave Barstow, his broken motorcycle mysteriously repaired and ready for the road. The townspeople organized a farewell celebration that became a community-wide expression of gratitude and affection. Children presented hand-drawn pictures of the battle, while adults offered gifts and heartfelt thanks. The celebration felt more like a family gathering than a celebrity send-off, which perfectly suited Donnie's humble nature. Frank's farewell present was the perfectly restored 1976 Harley-Davidson he'd been working on for months. The motorcycle represented appreciation not just for Donnie's heroism, but for his friendship and respect. "Every warrior needs a trustworthy mount," Frank explained, using military terminology that bridged their different backgrounds. Helen always said the best gifts are the ones that keep giving. Tommy had internalized the week's lessons about courage, responsibility, and standing up for others. He'd begun teaching defensive techniques to neighborhood children, ensuring Donnie's legacy continued beyond his departure. The three rescued women, Consuela, Maria, and Sophia, had found new lives in Barstow with jobs, education opportunities, and a community that valued their survival. Their presence served as daily reminders that the fight had saved real lives. As Donnie prepared to ride away, Frank presented him with a small token, a metal fragment from Helen's original Coca-Cola sign, fashioned into a keychain. "So you remember that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have to," Frank explained. Donnie accepted it with genuine emotion, understanding its significance perfectly. As the restored Harley carried Donnie toward the horizon, Frank returned to his garage where Tommy was already working on a customer's car, applying lessons about precision, patience, and integrity. The sound of Donnie's motorcycle faded into distance, but his influence remained in the community's renewed sense of purpose and confidence. Frank picked up his tools and returned to work, knowing that somewhere down the road, another town might need a guardian, and that ordinary people everywhere had potential for extraordinary courage when circumstances demanded it. The garage door stood open to the world, ready for whatever challenges came next. 6 months later, the desert wind carried the scent of spring across Barstow as Frank Kowalski stood in his garage doorway, watching Tommy teach a group of local children the defensive moves Donnie Yen had shown them. The boy, no longer really a boy at 17, moved with quiet confidence, demonstrating blocks and evasions while emphasizing the philosophy behind the techniques. "Remember," Tommy said to 8-year-old Susie Henderson, Marge's granddaughter, "martial arts isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others. Master Yen always said the best fight is the one you never have to have." Frank smiled at hearing Donnie's words echoed in his grandson's voice. The action star had left an indelible mark on their community, but perhaps nowhere more than in Tommy's transformation from reluctant teenager to confident young man with purpose. The garage itself had become something of a pilgrimage site. Not in any ostentatious way. Frank would never have tolerated that. But a steady stream of visitors came through Barstow specifically to see where the movie star and the mechanic had made their stand against human traffickers. Frank handled the attention with characteristic humility, always redirecting conversations toward the real heroes, the three women whose courage in testifying had dismantled an entire criminal network. Consuela, Maria, and Sophia had indeed stayed in Barstow, becoming integral parts of the community. Consuela worked at Dr. Chang's clinic as a medical assistant while studying for her nursing degree through online courses. Maria had enrolled in Barstow High School, her quick mind and determination making her a student despite the language barriers. Sophia, the quietest of the three, had found her calling working with Marge at the diner, her gentle manner and incredible memory for orders making her beloved by regular customers. The economic impact of their story had been unexpected but welcome. The media attention had brought tourism to a town that had been slowly dying. The Iron Vultures garage tours that Tommy reluctantly conducted on weekends provided college savings money, while Marge's diner thrived with visitors hoping to hear first-hand accounts of the dramatic week that had changed everything. But it was the deeper changes that mattered most to Frank. The community that had nearly fractured under pressure had emerged stronger and more united than anyone could have imagined. Bill Watson, who had once demanded Frank and Donnie's surrender, now served as head of the newly formed Community Safety Committee, coordinating with state and federal law enforcement to ensure no criminal organization could ever again gain a foothold in their town. Pete Morrison had expanded his hardware store into a full security consultation business, using his Korean War experience to help other small communities prepare for potential threats. Dr. Chang's practice had grown to include trauma counseling for trafficking victims from across the region, funded by a foundation established with donations that poured in after the story went national. Sheriff Brennan had been elected county sheriff in a landslide, running on a platform of community cooperation and zero tolerance for corruption. His first act was establishing a regional task force specifically targeting human trafficking routes through the desert Southwest. The task force had already disrupted 2 major networks and rescued 37 victims in its first 6 months. Agent Rodriguez visited monthly, ostensibly to check on the 3 women's welfare, but really to see how the community was healing. Her investigation had led to the dismantling of trafficking networks across 4 states, with over 200 arrests and the rescue of nearly 300 victims. The intelligence gathered in Barstow had proven crucial to understanding how these operations worked and how to stop them. "You know," she told Frank during her latest visit, "what you and Donnie did here has become a case study at Quantico. We're teaching agents that sometimes the best law enforcement comes from communities that refuse to be victims." Frank had received letters from around the world, veterans who understood his choice to stand and fight, families of trafficking victims grateful for the network's destruction, and ordinary people inspired by the story of a small town that refused to surrender to evil. He answered every letter personally, always emphasizing that he was just one man who got lucky enough to find the right allies at the right moment. The garage itself bore subtle changes that spoke to its newfound significance. Helen's Coca-Cola sign hung in its place of honor, but now it was accompanied by a small plaque reading, "In memory of Helen Kowalski, who taught us that some things are worth preserving." Below it, another plaque honored the 3 rescued women, Consuela, Maria, and Sophia, whose courage brought justice. Most visitors missed the 3rd edition, a simple metal keychain hanging from a hook near Frank's workbench. It was fashioned from a fragment of Helen's original sign, identical to the one Donnie carried on his journeys. Frank touched it sometimes, when working on particularly difficult repairs, remembering the week when everything changed and the friendship that had emerged from impossible circumstances. Tommy finished his lesson and approached his grandfather, sweat beading on his forehead. From the afternoon heat, "Mrs. Rodriguez called," he said. "Another trafficking case in Arizona. She wanted to know if we'd be willing to talk to the local sheriff about community preparation." Frank nodded slowly. Over the past months, they'd provided consultation to dozens of law enforcement agencies and community groups. It seemed their experience had value beyond Barstow's borders. "What do you think?" Frank asked his grandson. Tommy considered the question seriously, as he did everything now. "I think Master Yen would say we have a responsibility to help others learn what we learned. And I think Grandma Helen would say that good people helping good people is how the world gets better." Frank smiled, hearing both Helen's wisdom and Donnie's philosophy in his grandson's words. "Then we'll go. But first, help me finish Mrs. Santos's transmission. Some things never change. People still need their cars fixed." As they worked together in the familiar rhythm of tools and concentration, Frank reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely widower going through the motions of existence. Now he was a reluctant hero, whose story inspired others, a mentor to his grandson, and a guardian of values that seemed increasingly rare in the modern world. The sound of a motorcycle engine in the distance made both Frank and Tommy look up hopefully, but it was just a tourist passing through. Donnie Yen had kept his promise to stay in touch. Postcards from various locations, occasional phone calls, and one memorable video message from a film set where he dedicated a particularly spectacular fight sequence to my friends in Barstow who showed me what real courage looks like. But Frank understood that some people were meant to keep moving, carrying their light from place to place rather than settling down. Donnie was out there somewhere, probably helping someone else who needed a guardian angel with martial arts skills. In a humble heart, as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Helen had always loved, Frank Kowalski returned to his work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new repairs to make, new lessons to teach his grandson about integrity and courage and the importance of standing up for what's right. The garage door remained open to the world, a symbol of welcome and readiness. Because sometimes ordinary people were called to do extraordinary things, and when that call came, they needed to be prepared to answer. In the distance, a coyote howled, not a sound of danger this time, but simply part of the desert's eternal song. Frank smiled and reached for his next tool, ready for whatever the road ahead might bring. If you liked the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.